Hello, and thanks for having us. I'm Jason Stark with Miscele, and I'd like to thank Andrew at the Craft Beer Professionals. Today, we're going to be going over emulsion technologies and opportunities and strategies that can be utilized in production applications. This is a practical guide to cannabis emulsions for brewers. We're going to go through a number of different components over the course of this presentation. You can see our overview here, but we'll start with a brief introduction, go through some of the process, understand a little bit more about cannabis. We're going to dive into some more of the specifics of emulsions, different types of emulsions, the different specifics revolving around emulsions, and emulsion adjacent type systems. We're going to look at dosing math, some other additional factors to consider, how to begin navigating, onboarding new emulsion suppliers, going into a little bit of the costs, and then we'll wrap it up. Like I said, my name is Jason Stark. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer with Miscele. Been in the cannabis industry for over 10 years, worked in a number of different markets, both hemp and cannabis. I ran vertical operations. In Colorado, I've been working very closely with operations to ensure that they're monitoring their margins, improving their COGS, and focusing on efficiencies and product development. Here today to help kind of bridge the gap between where the brewery industry is and how they can begin to onboard emulsions and different types of technology to create new SKUs and opportunities for new revenue streams. Miscele is a science-based foundation with a strong background in pharmaceutical drug delivery systems. And for the better part of the last 5 years, they have created a remarkable product by the name of O2W. O2W is a SMEDS technology that's utilizing cannabinoids and self-emulsifying technology in order to create water-compatible formats to create beverages. The combined team has experience of over 80 years, is in collaboration with the University of Toronto. The technology behind all of their products is patented, and they've taken everything to the nines. Comprehensive laboratory testing protocols, PK studies, preclinical trials, enhanced bioavailability, and integration capabilities in various formats, and specifically beverage applications. Going into a little bit of an understanding of the markets where they are. Cannabis beverages year over year have recognized significant growth and is forecasted to see an annual growth rate of over 35% year over year, leading into 2030, reaching as high as a $7.9 billion market, if not higher. The numbers kind of all over the place because the hemp beverage market doesn't necessarily have the same data analytics that traditional beverage markets have had historically. North America leading the charge with over 53% of the market share in 2023. More on alcohol and kind of why we're here today. This is the third consecutive year that the beer industry has recognized the decline, and market shares remain flat, and young drinkers are trending towards looking for alternatives of different types of beverage opportunities that may not necessarily be alcohol driven. So why do you care? A lot. The industry evolution is showing for that, beer is becoming a broader category, and what's being made available in tap rooms and by beer companies is more than just the pilsners and IPAs and things like that. The rising trends of functional drinks, NA beers, and cannabis/hemp beverages are rising, as per the previous slide. As a brewer, you have a unique advantage that you have this existing infrastructure, creativity, and consumer trust to lean on in order to bring a SKU like this to market with minimal barrier to entry from all the headache that it takes to understand even just a canning operation and all the other nuances that go into this, whether it's a dealcoholized beer or seltzer or even juice-based beverage. Having that existing market share is actually going to lend to better credibility and bringing more recognized acceptance to the hemp beverage market, and give these new SKUs some life to breathe. So the next big infusion opportunity, alcohol consumption on the decline, functional beverages on the rise. There are early competitors that are already coming to the market. Lagunitas and Pabst are already, out there with a hemp-derived beverage. Being that this market is still very early, you still have an opportunity to come into this market with some significant opportunities to capture that market share and develop that name and build some brand equity. So where it all begins, with the cannabis plant and understanding the different types. Legally, the industry classifies the cannabis plant in one of two ways. It's either hemp, which is when a plant contains less than 0.3% THC by dry weight, or more than 0.3% THC by dry weight. Less than 0.3, you're looking at hemp, and more than 0.3, you're looking at marijuana. Marijuana would be largely considered, federally illegal, whereas hemp and CBD products that contain less than 0.3% THC are hemp-based products. The cannabinoids within the plant are within a structure known as trichomes, which if you've ever seen the leaf structure of a cannabis plant, you're seeing that on the surface, you have these what look like little crystals, and those crystals under a microscope and on the plant while they're alive look like these little glandular heads. Have a stalk, and then these round spears at the top contain terpenes, flavonoids, and cannabinoids like CBD and THC. Depending on how the plant is harvested and the type of input material that's recognized, you're either looking at a fresh frozen material, which would lend to products like live resin or rosin, or you're looking at something that's dried and cured. You're looking at wax, shatter, crude oil distillates, and things like that aren't really chasing after what's known as the terpene profile. Cannabis and hops are actually fairly related in the Cannabisaceae family. So here's a plant anatomy that we can kind of go through. This is a female plant. The female plant in cannabis is largely what's sought after, as the male plant is largely retained for fibers and stalks and seeds and components like that. Not seeds, but pollen. The female plant is what's grown commercially in licensed facilities across the country. The female plant is what's cloned or propagated throughout the country in fields for hemp farms. But the female plant has a number of these components here. And the first one is this cola. This is a premium bud that sits at the top of the plant and has the highest concentration of cannabinoids, as opposed to what would be down here, which would be considered a B or C bud. Within these, you have bracts, and you've got pistils and fan leaves, and trichomes are littered throughout the plant, where all those, like I said, the cannabinoids and terpenes are located. The root zone or rhizosphere here, supports everything like any plant, and is a big point of focus for cultivators to ensure that the plant remains as healthy as possible. I'm going to go through this. Obviously, a lot of nuance that can go into the cannabis extraction method over the different applications and finished product types that can be had within the cannabis industry. But it's important to understand that the input largely drives the extraction process. So you're looking at fresh frozen first, which is a little bit more nuanced and more rare in the hemp industry. But that's not to say that people aren't infusing beverages with fresh frozen live products. The fresh frozen process goes by harvesting the plant at the end of its life cycle, and then taking those buds and immediately putting them into a freezer. This retains up to 40% of the terpene profile or aromatic compounds that contribute to the general flavor that cannabis strain has to contribute. two products that would come off of fresh frozen would be a live resin or a live rosin. Alternatively, if you're looking for a dry or cured base material, you're going to be harvesting that plant and immediately hanging it to dry in very controlled temperature and humidity. That would then lead to a less terpene-rich product, but more stable for transportation and components like that. The finished products and oils that would come off of a dry cured or biomass type of material would be a crude oil, distillate, isolate, and isomers for further processing down the way. Extraction, you're seeing a number of different types of solvents that are used as well as mechanical processes. So on the nuanced kind of artisanal side of manufactured concentrates, you're looking at more of a hydrocarbon, butane, propane, utilized to extract a specific profile off of a live product or even dried product sometimes. But you're looking to create these live products which have the high terpene profiles, which are generally used for dabbing or consuming these concentrates. Ethanol and CO2 are largely reserved for mass production. You're seeing a lot more ethanol and CO2 in the hemp extraction fields just to ensure that you can process a large mass of material and harvest it for its cannabinoids, as opposed to nuancing it for the terpene profile that you'd get off of a fresh frozen live product. Then lastly, you have mechanical, which is a bubble bag, solventless extraction methodology by which you take frozen buds and combine it with water and ice and knock those glandular trichomes off of the plant and collect those and create a refined oil off of that has a very high and true expression of the plant and contains high terpene profile and a very nice product. Beyond, all of these can yield what would be the first step, which is a crude. The crude oil is what is largely used in full spectrum extracts or products, because it's the first extraction component that goes from plant to oil. That oil that has high levels of waxes, lipids, terpenes, flavonoids, manganese, chlorophyll, it's crude. Potency generally lies anywhere from 45 to 65%. You then winterize that before it goes into distillation. You can then take a distillate and run it to isolate. Isolate can then be isomerized into other compounds than what would naturally be occurring in the plant. And I'll touch on that in a second. So here are kind of visualizations of a few different types of cannabis extracts and extract products. First is the crude oil, generally a darker in color, fairly aromatic. Like I said, has 45 to 65%. This product will then be processed through a vacuum distillation system, which will volatilize and then condense down the cannabinoids into a highly pure extract, which would have minimal flavor, minimal aromatic compounds. This is largely what's used in the space currently, both on hemp and or marijuana, depending on the application. But for our purposes, we're talking, you see a lot of hemp-based distillates that are being used to infuse beverages and a number of other products. Potency generally lies anywhere from 70 to 98, 99%, depending on how many times it's refined. That process can then also be isolated, where you get even higher pure crystalline cannabinoid form of CBD, THC, CBG, you name it. This can contain 99 to 100. Sometimes labs will even show over 100 because manufacturers are able to achieve a higher purity than the reference standards they're using at the lab. This is an example of a live resin or rosin product coming off of those fresh frozen materials. High terpene profiles, generally a potency of anywhere from 60 to 80%. All of these products can be achieved using the initial products that exist, or the original cannabinoid profiles that exist in the plant, and then isolated and concentrated down. Isolate is largely being used as a base material to be isomerized, where you'll react this with a high or low pH acid in specific temperatures for a specific amount of time, where you can actually convert CBD into Other cannabinoid compounds like delta 8, delta 10, THCP, THCO, and even delta 9 THC, which is largely what most products are being manufactured at. When you talk to cannabis extractors or hemp extractors, many of them will have options to buy either isomerized delta 9 THC or naturally deriving delta 9 THC. The naturally occurring and naturally derived will tend to run a slightly higher price, but something you can ask your hemp based cannabinoid providers as you begin those discussions. So, when we talk about consuming cannabinoids, it's important to understand the uptake. Traditional edibles that would be a distillate or a crude or a full spectrum oil or even a rosin that are directly homogenized into a brownie recipe or a gummy base or components like that are largely processed through the liver through first pass metabolism. In the liver, you recognize a conversion of delta 9 to 11 hydroxy, which is 6 times more potent. You only recognize nearly 10 to 20% of what was actually put into the product. Onset is anywhere from 45 minutes to 90 minutes, and duration, depending on quantity taken, can last as much as 4 to 12 hours. Today, we're going to be talking about emulsified cannabinoids and components like that. Nanoparticles allow for lymphatic absorption bypassing the liver, which means that it goes directly into the bloodstream, and onset comes on within 5 to 30 minutes, depending on particle size and type of emulsion used. This is more efficient at crossing the blood-brain barrier, and you're recognizing very high bioavailability, anywhere from 70 to 99%. Another big component to why this product and format and SKU has been recognizing the traction it has is because of its sessionability. Whereas an edible traditionally lasted anywhere from 4 to 12 hours, you're looking at hemp beverages lasting as low as an hour and a half and maxing out maybe at 4 hours. So you can have an experience and then be done with that experience with very low commitment. So turning weed into water and understanding the process. Cannabinoids are naturally hydrophobic, resisting integration with water-based beverages. Advanced micelle technologies creates a bridge between oil and water molecules. Water compatibility, you're looking at properly emulsified cannabinoids distribute evenly in beverages without separation and enhanced delivery. Water compatible cannabinoids offer improved bioavailability and faster onset times. So THC and CBD are oils, and they naturally don't want to be with water. Water-based drinks require emulsification in order for stability and consistency. Without a proper emulsion, they're going to separate and create either a poor taste, poor experience, or invalid product that's going to end with an unhappy customer. An emulsion, at its core, are mixture where tiny droplets of oil are dispersed in water. In order to make oil-based ingredients like cannabinoids water compatible for beverage and edible application. Emulsions improve bioavailability, clarity, stability of infused products. It's the key to producing a clear, shelf-stable, and consistent cannabis beverage. Here we're going to talk about 4 of the main systems, and I have emulsion in quotations because not all of these are technically emulsions. Microemulsions and nanoemulsions, yes, are in fact emulsions. Encapsulation and starch inclusion complex are not technically emulsions. So, microemulsions. Despite the name microemulsions, you're actually achieving nanoparticle size. This is a nomenclature component that's come over from pharmaceutical, and with the increasing formulation and technological advancements, we've been able to achieve nanoparticle sizing. This also falls into a classification known as SMEDs, or self-microemulsifying drug delivery systems, where there's no energy required, there's no specialized equipment where you can combine your oil, your SMEDs or O2W, mix those together, add it to water, and it'll spontaneously emulsify in water without having to put a lot of energy. These are peg-free, clean label. Bioavailability and onset is 5 to 15 minutes, ideal for beverages, NA, beers, and shots. It's important to understand a micelle in cannabis emulsions. And if you look closely on this image, you'll see a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. And these tails are oil loving, will naturally adhere to the cannabis oil, and then the hydrophilic heads will then attract to water, encapsulating the cannabis oil in a layer of water molecules. And this is how it spontaneously happens by the nature of these molecules. Nanoemulsions, largely submicron size. You can see anywhere from 200, 150. I've seen, depending on how well it's processed and formulated, it can be kind of all over the place. And amount of time spent, energy input. It can have a high clarity and a fast onset. It does require high shearing equipment like sonicators, high pressure homogenizers, or high speed homogenizers, components like that can be costly and time consuming and finicky when it comes to formulation. Often includes surfactants, PEGs that may not be clean label, and it's common in beverage applications, but higher cost due to equipment and processing time and even lead time in deliveries. Encapsulations, encase cannabinoids in a protective carrier for controlled release. Requires special equipment. It's good for solid formats and heat-sensitive actives. Typically used for dry or capsule-based deliveries, not necessarily beverages. It can have beverage applications, but it's not largely found. Has and can carry some sophisticated formulations. Generally has limitations with rapid onset, and you're seeing not necessarily the 5 to 30 minutes, but 30 to 60. It can be opaque in color and or clarity, which we eat with our eyes first, so it's important to make sure we're achieving that. And starch inclusion complexes, and I know we're getting some fancy terms here, but commonly modified cyclodextrins and maltodextrins are used to form an inclusion of complexes with cannabinoids, embedding them within a carbohydrate matrix. And essentially, you're taking sugars and keeping the cannabis oil within that sugar matrix in order to keep a suspension. Typically used to convert oils into powdered formats like drink mixes and tablets or capsules. Has lower clarity in finished beverages, slower onset. It's prone to clumping. It has a bit of variability in absorption and versus liquid emulsions. So why nanoparticle size matters, and this is kind of everything, right? Everyone hears nanoemulsions and nanoparticle size, and it's largely due to uptake and clarity. Bioavailability, smaller particles are more readily absorbed by the body. Clarity, nano-sized emulsions, you're talking anywhere from like anything under 100 nanometer particle size, you're absolutely getting a clear beverage. It's much more visually appealing, and also that you're getting higher uptake. You're also seeing higher recognized stability. By reducing particle size, it prevents coalescence and separation over time. You're getting more cannabinoid exposure to absorption sites, faster onset times, but there is a trade-off. And the smaller the particle goes, I mean, I've seen people claiming anywhere from 2 to 4 nanometer particle size. The smaller you go in that particle, you're also recognizing a higher level of surface area, which means that the main ingredients are also being more exposed to the palate, which means that inevitably you're getting a higher level of bitterness. Here's just some examples of visual clarity in different components, making sure that maintaining clarity and stability. And we're going to talk a little bit more about stability and how it pertains to potency in a few. There's another component to emulsions that's very important to make a distinction between. There's kinetically stable emulsions and thermodynamically stable emulsions. Kinetic energy, refers to the fact that in order to create an emulsion requires the input of high pressure shearing or sonication in order to ensure the particle size is broken down small enough that the acting emulsifiers are able to maintain a stable emulsion in solution. These processes are nuanced and highly formulated and require frankly, some PhD work in many cases to get a very high performing kinetically stable emulsion. They can be vulnerable to temperature, pH, and time. They generally require cold chain logistics to ensure the stability, and are common in nanoemulsions and some liposomes and some other components. Thermodynamically stable emulsions are at rest as an emulsion. And once the emulsion is created, it's stable. Beyond that, especially as it comes to O2W, there is no requirement for high levels of energy inputs in order to break down particle size to make it stable. So by sheer mechanics of the chemistry inside of the thermodynamically stable O2W, you get a product that will go into solution, spontaneously emulsify, and then be able to stay within that emulsion. It's very resistant to heat changes, freeze-thaw cycles, and even if the emulsion breaks at very high pasteurization rates, I'm talking like super high, it will even go back into the emulsion once standard temperature and pressure is recognized. I created some charts comparing the 4 different technologies based on onset, clarity, equipment needs, stability type, and whether or not they're peg-free. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but you can use this as a reference at a later time. And I'll make these slides available to anyone who's interested. Just feel free to email me at the email at the bottom at the end of this presentation. Dosing. As simple as I feel, or it is, to do cannabis dosing, it's still something that's best explained. And I have no doubt that this community is going to be more than capable of executing on these types of processes as you begin understanding or identifying the strategies of bringing on these types of products. Some of the key conversions: 1 kilogram is 1,000 grams, is a million milligrams. 1 gallon is 128 ounces. These are probably not new to most of you. So if 1 kilogram is a million milligrams, and we've received in-house a 87% THC distillate, very much like the oils that you've seen earlier in the presentation, it's all done by weight. So if you take 0.87 and multiply it by 1 million, you get 870,000 milligrams of THC per 1 kilo of cannabis distillate. Within that milligram count, that would then mean that if you were creating a 10 milligram THC beverage, you could then take the 870,000 milligrams divided by 10, and you'd have enough THC in that 1 kilogram to produce 87,000 beverages from 1 kilogram of 87% THC distillate. Depending on the application, whether you're going with a nano emulsion or a micro emulsion, you're likely going to be using a loaded, either a loaded emulsion or a loaded O2W product that generally carries a potency of around anywhere from 5% to 20%. And the math kind of remains the same. So instead of 0.87 as 87%, you're going to use 0.2. So 0.2 times 1 million is 200,000 milligrams THC. So if you're targeting a 10 milligram beverage, that 1 kilo of 20% loaded O2W or emulsion is going to have the ability to dose or infuse 20,000 infused beverages. So then I was like, all right, let's kind of apply this to pallet math. And this is not exactly a pallet. A pallet's going to be different for everyone, but if you're producing 7,391 cans dosed at 5 milligrams of THC per can, this is roughly the math that you'd be able to start doing to identify how that dosing process would occur. So you would take that 7,391 cans, by your ounces, develop your batch size, and then probably assign a 5% overage to account for any production loss, end up with roughly 727.56 gallons. Then calculating the THC, you're going to determine how many units you need to manufacture. Is 7,391 times 1.05 to account for the 5% overage on the production loss. And then you're going to have your total amount of cans to manufacture times 5 milligrams THC. And so 7760.55 times 5 is going to yield 38,802.75 milligrams, which sounds like a lot, but considering that 1 kilo of distillate has 870,000 milligrams, you're going to need significantly less than 1 kilo, or at least that 1 kilo is going to produce a significant number of pallets. So 38,802.75 milligrams THC. So active requirements, if your emulsion that you're using to dose each one of these these batches is at the 20% THC, assuming like a loaded OTW, that will carry 200 milligrams per gram, right? So 0.2 times 1 gram, or 1,000 milligrams, is going to be 200 milligrams per gram. If the total batch requires a 38,802.75, you just divide 38,802.75 divided by 200 to get the total number of grams of pre-emulsion or loaded OTW or other product that would be used to go into that batch of 194.01 grams, as seen here. When you're producing your batch, remember to account for displacement of the amount of volume of liquid that's being added to the batch as the displacing component to ensure that you're getting the appropriate amount of milligrams per ounce. And before we go into some other components, there's 3 different aspects of dosing that can lead to varied results as far as finished product potency. And one of the biggest issues in the space right now is a concept known as leaching or scalping within canned beverages. Inside these cans, you all know that there's can liners, and can liners have a propensity to absorb cannabinoids that are in an emulsified state. But essentially, the phenomenon where cannabinoids, terpenes, and other active ingredients are absorbed by the container's material, often the lining of aluminum cans. Hydrophobic cannabinoids are attracted to certain polymers used in can liners, common BPA and epoxy liners. What this means is that you can recognize loss, right? So if you're dosing at 10 milligrams and 10 to 20% of that is being absorbed into the can liner, you need to be able to accommodate for that, and we'll go into that here in a moment. This variability can lead to different amounts in each can, and the regulatory risks, depending on how each state navigates this topic, is going to be a major component to how you navigate your manufacturing process. So how do you mitigate it? You can do testing on a number of different types of products. You can do pre-testing protocols and work with your labs to establish what type of dosing methodology you need to do batch testing before and after the product's canned to see how the product ends up sitting. And then alternative packaging, I don't think anyone here is considering glass bottles right now, but there are some can liners that may perform better. If you want to learn more about that, you can always reach out. There are some emulsions that will recognize as high as 20% loss. OTW, as our micro emulsion, will recognize anywhere from 10 to 15% loss. It's something that the industry as a whole is navigating and trying to come up with a better solution for. As of right now, manufacturers are pretty much accounting for this by, frankly, overdosing in anticipation of the expected loss due to leaching. So if you run your tests and you know that you're recognizing a 20% loss, you're going to do a target dose on that can of 12 milligrams instead of 10, right? So you're going to multiply 10 times 1.2. you can get your 12, and that's where you're going to target, because then after the month or two that it sits in the can, depending on temperatures and can liner and all the variables that go into that, ideally it will stabilize at a 10 milligram potency, which is going to remain a consistent effect that your end consumer can rely on. Our microemulsion O2W product has been recognizing anywhere from 10 to 15%, which means that you get to dose a little bit lower. They're looking at 11 to 11.5 milligrams THC per unit. Variances, and within both the state licensed operations and markets, as well as the hemp market, and state by state has different compliance needs regarding the amount of variance that's allowed in finished product testing. In a perfect world, we would dose a product and it would come out 10 milligrams on the nose every time. But the fact is that there's a number of variables that go into the manufacturing process, from testing labs to all these components. But each state gives you a plus or minus 15% variance, which means that a 10 milligram unit can accommodate as low as a 8.5 milligram THC per unit and as high as 11.5 milligrams THC per unit. And this is a cushion to ensure that product isn't just being recalled and thrown out left and right, because the nature of working with a botanical product and trying to deliver a consistent effect. And again, the math isn't hard, but it should be noted, 10 milligrams, if you're multiplying times 0.5 and removing that from your 10, you're sitting at 8.5 milligrams is your baseline minimum to ensure that a compliant product is manufactured at quote unquote 10 milligrams, and as high as 11.5 milligrams at a 15% overage. And then the labs themselves are still navigating a number of components that go into it. You're looking at potential incomplete extractions of cannabinoids from the sample, where they may not recognize all of it at the time of extraction. Maintenance schedules can kind of fall behind. Doesn't necessarily mean the equipment's not working, but it may not be as accurate as it needs to be. Lab to lab, you'll recognize inconsistent methodologies of how to test these products. You're also looking at sample degradation, depending on how it was stored, handled, and the amount of time it took for them to get to your sample before it was actually handled. These inaccuracies can also lend to the variances in finished products, and it's important to choose a lab that's going to be an asset and an ally to support the efforts of figuring out how to dose your product and make sure that the testing is in line with where you are dosing. As far as the potential losses, you're looking at as high as 15% sometimes. So your 10 milligram may show up as an 8.5. It's not that bad. I don't think historically I'm seeing anywhere from 3 to 5% in worst case scenarios, but still something to account for and to understand as a bare minimum when you're starting to have these conversations with local testing labs or national testing labs that you're looking to work with. So after all this, it's important to understand what type of questions you should be asking your emulsion supplier. Shelf life stability of finished product versus concentrates, what type of conditions you have to store it in, product compatibility of that specific emulsion and the formulation that's being utilized and how it responds to NA beers, RTDs, seltzers, high tannin, high acidity, low pH, carbonation. Formulation interactions and stability testing, light, oxygen, heat, agitation, carbonation, freeze-thaw cycles, and pasteurization resistance. A lot of components that all go into the manufacture of these types of products. Additionally, is it clean label? Is it PEG free? What type of lead times can you expect? How is the product priced? Is it on a per milligram basis, per kilogram? Pre-emulsified, is it cost to emulsify? And I'll go into pricing in a few. Can it be dosed in line? And again, I'll make these slides available if you guys want to reference these. And we also have a PDF that we can share that's helpful for anyone who's interested in shopping their emulsions and making sure that they're taken care of. In the event that you're sourcing your own cannabinoids, which you may want to do, and largely will be, is making sure that they provide certificates of analysis on full panel testing. Full panel testing being potency, microbial, heavy metal, pesticides, and residual solvents. All of those are fairly standard in the cannabis industry and should come with any of the products that you inevitably will be purchasing. See if they have CGMP or ISO accredited facilities, and make sure see if they can share that documentation with you to keep on hand. How's it shipped, type of containers, what type of lead times, minimums, what types of variations of hemp-derived delta-9 THC oils do offer. As I mentioned before, there's naturally deriving, there's isomerized, there's are they isolating minor cannabinoids? Sometimes you want to do maybe not just THC. A popular trend right now is being able to utilize a number of different cannabinoids to elicit different effects. So you're looking at, maybe you want to do a THC, CBD, and CBG blend for a more relaxing, more entourage effect style type of component. Understanding costs and cost of goods for emulsions. This is another line item on your cost of goods sheet that's going to be a part of your production, and understanding the finances around it to ensure how to navigate this and plan it out for your production is important. Proper emulsion selection can greatly reduce production costs. Understanding real-time COGS as a market and sourcing fluctuations occur can be keen advantages in a rapidly growing market. As product development continues, it's important to know where you can invest more on ingredients when identifying product differentiating factors in formulation. And the following are some of the averages and ranges, and encourage everyone to do their own pricing analysis. So, depending on who you're sourcing from and how you source, it may be priced on a price per milligram basis. This is pretty straightforward, because if you know that you're planning on doing a 10 milligram unit, you can take that price per milligram and multiply it by 10, and you've got your unit COGS. Generally, this is the model that's used for anyone who's doing a pre-emulsification process and sending you a emulsion concentrate, and those are the pre-emulsified products that range anywhere from 5 to 20% in potency and are ready to be put into a batch or used in that capacity. And the next way that pricing is done is the price to emulsify 1 entire kilogram of active material. And it's largely a strategy used for licensed facilities who frankly can't take hemp-derived cannabinoids and bring it into a marijuana or cannabis market like Colorado or Nevada, things like that, for any one of the dispensary sold products. Largely, this is where they'll take their equipment, they'll bring their IP, they'll bring their strategy, and then help you to emulsify on site. And that can range anywhere from $8,000 to $15,000 per kilogram emulsified product. Price per kilogram of pre-emulsified material. So if you're to buy some of these 5 to 20% pre-emulsified content, it can range anywhere from $2,000 to $6,000, which will then break down based on the potency of that material to the per milligram basis. On the per milligram basis, you're seeing as high as 1.9 cents per milligram, and you can be significantly lower than that as well. Then you can also go with a price for emulsifier only. Example like O2W Smeds, because there's no equipment required. It allows for manufacturers to onboard an ingredient that allows them to do the emulsions in-house, control their ingredient list, and be able to emulsify on as needed basis and not as a just-in-time manufacturing basis. Doesn't require cold chain. And if you were to break it down per liter, it's $1,500 per liter, which would be good for about 25,000 10 milligram units. On a price per milligram, you're looking at 0.66 milligrams as opposed to like a 1.9. That's assuming you bought an 85% distillate at $750 a kilo. And then the price to emulsify one entire kilogram of distillate would be roughly $48.75. O2W is going to be one of the better options for brewers. We think it's absolutely an opportunity for people to utilize a inventory item in order to execute on their manufacturing. It's cost effective, clean label, and it's fast and easy to integrate with any employee able to do the process. Integration is easily done, inline mixing or batch processing, no need for high shear homogenizers. It's compatible with canning lines, bottling operations, and batch mixing tanks. The equipment requirements is none. It can all be done by hand. So no CapEx is great. We're happy to help people with quick start SOPs. We've got a formulation calculator to make things very clean and straightforward. We've got sample kits that people can start to play with in hand to begin their R&D process, and we're happy to help anyone firsthand. I'll go to the comments section for a bit if anyone has any questions. Oh, a couple here. So Jamie, I have a question here from you. Thanks for reaching out. As far as how hard is solubilizing dissolving step at the plant, couldn't be easier. It's really a mix, stir, and infuse process, and essentially the SOP that would be utilized at production would be taking your active. Let's say you sourced 200 grams of hemp delta 9 THC distillate, and then you are able to combine that with the O2W product. You mix those because it's oil, and they'll mix together very easily. And you can then take that, now what we would call loaded O2W, and add that to water. You'd be able to stir it, and you can watch the emulsion occurring spontaneously. It doesn't happen in an instant, but about 2 to 3 minutes of mixing by hand, and you'll see that it has gone into solution. So I see, does the spontaneously emulsify mean it dissolves and disperses readily in a brink or bucket, and then that gets added to the beverage tank from that point? Yes. So at scale production, we would say you would do like a 10-to-1. You take your loaded O2W and do a 10-to-1 mixture of your water-based beverage plus the loaded O2W, and mix that to make kind of like a pre-concentrate water. And then you add that to your tank, which would then homogenize very quickly if you have any sort of agitation. Mad Dog, happy to get you a sample. If you want to just reach out, info@maselli.com. Just have a toke, then a real beer. Yeah. So happy to answer any questions if anyone's interested. Again, I'm here to help. If anyone has questions after this, feel free to email me at info@maselli.com. I'll get your email within a day or two, and we can talk through any of the considerations you guys are looking at your facility in operation. All right. Well, if there's no more, happy to help, Jamie. If there's no more questions, thank you so much, and have a great day.